I have been recording vocals for over 10 years, and during that time I have learned a lot of techniques. Some of it good, some of it not so good, and some of it that used to be good but is no longer relevant. And there's 5 of those things that I want to break down in this video today. Number 1 is recording way too hot. It used to be that you had to record really hot, where you're going in just below clipping. That's back in the good old days when you had analog gear and all of that other nonsense that you had to deal with, and there was a thing called a noise floor. You don't have to deal with that anymore if you have any sort of modern equipment whatsoever. No matter whether it's a Focusrite or an Audient or a UA or even some of the Behringer interfaces, you probably don't have a noise floor that you have to deal with. And because of that, you can actually turn the gain knob down farther than you think you can, because you can turn it back up later in your DAW and not have a problem with noise at all. In fact, I would rather you record just a little too quiet than a little too loud, because digital clipping does not sound good and there's not really a good way to fix it. So if you have to err on the side of caution, err on the side of a little bit too quiet, because there's really no negative effects of recording just a little bit too quiet. You're giving yourself plenty of headroom and you don't have to worry about a noise floor. Number 2 is not using effects on the way in when you're recording. If you're working in the studio with an artist, or whether you're recording yourself, you should have some sort of EQ and compression chain going on while you're recording over the song you've made. This just helps you get a better performance. You want to know how the microphone is going to react to your voice in the middle of the song, because every song is just a little bit different and every vocal performance is just a bit different. You want to have a rough idea of what it's going to sound like on the way in, and that'll save you a ton of time later on trying to fix all different kinds of other stuff like EQ, especially in the low end with the proximity effect. If you know what it's going to sound like, you can adjust your mouth closer or farther away from the microphone, and that's going to give you a way better result than playing around with an EQ for hours and hours and hours on end. Now, this really plays into the outdated technique number 3, which is staying too close to your microphone. It used to be way back in the good old days, the only way to adjust the volume of something was the actual volume fader itself, and you'd have one microphone in the middle of the room, and then every person would walk up to that microphone. And then it got to a point where we had all of this really cool equipment that everybody would just kind of stay about 3 to 6 inches away from the microphone, and no matter what they did, they didn't get dynamic with it at all. This becomes a problem because you want to be able to record a performance and capture it the way you want it to be heard. There is a massively different sound between you getting close to the microphone and farther away. You back up farther away from the microphone, you're going to pick up a little bit more of the room, you're going to lose a little bit of that low end because of the proximity effect, and it's something that you should really play with in the studio while you're recording yourself or the artist that you're working with. I still recommend putting a pop filter about 3 to 4 inches away from your microphone, so that way you don't get too close, because roughly for most microphones, any closer than that really causes problems with the proximity effect. You get a lot of low end and it sounds like you have a big boomy radio voice, and that's great if that's what you're going for, but most of the time there's just not enough room for that in a song. And now number 4, and I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this, but outdated technique number 4 is relying on a vocal shield to capture all of your performances. If you don't have any sort of acoustic treatment up on your walls, you're still getting room reflections going directly into your microphone. Yes, it's catching some of your voice into that shield, and it's catching anything coming from the back in there, but anything that gets reverberated off the sides and around the room, you're going to get a lot of frequency buildup, especially in the corners, and it's all coming right back to your microphone. You're going to hear that. Choosing a dynamic microphone over a condenser microphone is probably going to help you a little bit as well, because they pick up a lot less room reflections than a condenser microphone, which is like super sensitive. So like an SM7B, a 58, a 57, anything like that's probably a better bet if you don't have acoustic treatment on the walls. But there's even a better way to get a nice tight vocal sound if you don't have acoustic treatment on your walls, and that's something I like to call the pop-up acoustic treatment technique. That's where I use all different sorts of household items to create a vocal booth anywhere in my house, in my kitchen, in my bathroom even if I wanted to, and I can get a nice tight vocal sound no matter where I'm at in my house. If you want to know more about that, I left a guide down in the description below. It's absolutely free. It's just called The Ultimate Guide to Recording Vocals at Home. You can download that guide and go through it and learn exactly what I do to get a nice tight vocal sound, even if I don't have acoustic treatment on the walls. And now number 5 is having too many comp takes. If you don't know what comp takes are, the basic concept is taking multiple performances and trying to push them all into one. This gives you the illusion that you had a perfect take all the way through. Everybody knows. It's a common trick, and it's been overused quite a bit. If you find yourself comping vocals in the middle of a verse and in between words, it's probably not a good idea, and you should probably go back to the original recording and seeing what's wrong, and then try to perform it again better, or have your vocalist come back in and do it again. I am by no means against vocal comps. You should definitely use them, but if you find yourself comping in vocals way too often, either you're being too particular, and yes, that is a thing, or you need to go back to the drawing board and capture a better performance. Because at the end of the day, your job as a mix engineer, mastering engineer, and producer is to capture the performance of an artist, whether that be yourself or somebody else that you're working with. It's always fun to think that you can fix it in the mix later on until you get to later on, and then now you have to fix it in the mix and realize that it would have just been a lot easier and you would have gotten a better result if you would have just gotten a better performance at the beginning. Now, talking about better performances, if you want to know what makes a melody catchy, click on this video right here. In that video, I break down exactly what makes a melody catchy and why rhythm is more important than melody. So click here and I'll see you over there. Now, as always, go create.